Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Another look at a story we haven't heard much about the last 12 months. Bob Arum says he regrets working with Daniel Kinahan. Legendary promoter Bob Arum says he now regrets working with Daniel Kinahan. Irishman Kinahan remains wanted by the Irish and American authorities for his links to criminality after being named the head of the Kinahan organized crime gang alongside his father, Christy, and brother, Christopher, in 2022 in a joint announcement by Irish and American authorities. Speaking to the Irish Mirror, Arum concedes he fell for Kinahan's charm and said Kinahan told him he wanted to clean up his act, become involved in the business of boxing, and be a role model for his children.
For his money laundering. He wanted to launder his money through boxing just like the rest of us.
Rest of us?
He told me that he was getting into boxing because he'd done bad things in the past and wanted to reform himself. He told me that he wanted to clean up his name because he wanted to be a role model for his kids. And I believed him.
Arum and Kinahan had worked closely together in previous years, which saw the likes of Tyson Fury, Cole Frampton, and Josh Taylor all ink promotional contracts with Arum's top-ranked promotional entity. The promoter denied that Kinahan discussed and explored the possibility of buying Arum's top-ranked promotional company, and Arum insisted that he had no intention of selling the promotional firm he built to Kinahan.
You'll remember that over a year ago, the heat was on and that the United States government levied sanctions against Kinahan.
It seemed like what he was trying to do was use boxing as a means to launder his money and expand his area of operations to the United States, at which point sanctions were levied against him that would thereby limit his area of operations and potential expanse.
He was already wanted by the Irish government, but they couldn't get to him because he fled to the UAE.
In recent years, the U.S. government got involved, and now they're all wrapped up in this. They want Kinahan too.
They haven't got him yet, though.
Some rumors circulating that Daniel Kinahan wanted to buy Top Rank.
That never happened. Maybe he was thinking about it in his head, but he never approached us. And that's the last thing that we would have done.
Despite Kinahan's previous successful charm offensive on Arum, the 92-year-old concedes he was aware of Kinahan's reputation but could not find any proof regarding his involvement in criminality before the U.S. imposed sanctions upon the alleged cartel leader almost 2 years ago in 2022, which we talked about extensively here on the channel, and how short of extradition back to either Ireland or the United States, he's gonna skate. He fled to that region of the world, the UAE. He fled there for a reason. It's because he knew the authorities wouldn't be able to get to him there, and they still haven't.
There's a lot of money in the UAE. A lot of it is dirty.
That's where Kinahan is. That's where he has been all this time.
We knew the history because, obviously, it was there if you Google it. But we didn't see anything that he was doing wrong. We saw no evidence that he was a drug leader.
U.S. authorities sanctioned Kinahan. Arum admitted he was shocked by the revelations, but felt the U.S. government would not have taken such measures without evidence.
Now, apparently, that wasn't the case. If that was the case, then the U.S. President, Joe Biden, wouldn't have brought in the sanctions on Kinahan. I'm not a naive guy. I have a law background and was in the Justice Department. I bought into what Kinahan told me because I didn't see anything to the contrary.
See no evil, hear no evil. Until the U.S. government levies sanctions against the guy, then it's time to sever ties, and Arum was right to do so. Boxing and criminality go hand in hand like peanut butter and jelly. They have, at least in previous years. It's the ideal environment to launder a lot of money. And I mean a lot of money. You can cook your own books whenever you want.
There's no oversight.
In order to explain your ill-gotten gains, what would be your ill-gotten gains should Joe Law come sniffing around with his big nose.
You ain't got nothing on me.
Once you get the ball rolling, could be very difficult to stop. And if Daniel Kinahan were allowed to infiltrate the U.S. market, the boxing market here, well, that would have really been something. But it seems that they nipped that problem in the bud before it became a problem.
They still haven't brought him to justice, though.
Well, I told you 2 years ago they weren't going to. I told you 2 years ago, in spite of the heat being on, unless the UAE were going to cooperate with the U.S. government to extradite him and ship him out, deliver him to the United States. It's all much ado about nothing. And well over a year later, two.
Have they done that yet?
Without condoning or condemning, I told you, they're not going to do nothing. He went to that part of the world for a reason. He knew what he was doing.
We all do.
In case you forgot, there was a fledgling promotional outfit that was helmed by Dick Schaefer. Richard Schaefer, formerly of Golden Boy Promotions. Then he jumped into bed with the PBC, a history with Al Heyman, funneling all of those Golden Boy fighters over to the PBC. You remember all that? Do you remember, circa 2021, late 2021, 2022, you see a fledgling promotional outfit come out that goes by the name Probellum, helmed by Richard Schaefer. And they're making friends all over the place.
Yeah.
Really fucking fast.
Yeah.
They start doing their own shows without any network money. No broadcast partner. They start doing their own shows. They're signing fighters left and right. Any fighter that isn't a top-ranked fighter, a Matchroom fighter, a Queensberry fighter, or a Golden Boy Promotions fighter, any of the outliers, they were signing all those fighters left and right.
There were a good number of familiar faces signed to Probellum.
Which was, at least on the face of it, helmed by Richard Schaefer. But underneath it all, a lot of people felt Probellum was just a front for Daniel Kinahan. It was just a front for the then defunct MTK Global.
Remember, 2 years ago, they went out of business.
MTK closed their doors.
Then when the heat was on, Probellum closed their doors.
All those fighters that they signed,
They jumped ship.
then subsequently, that company's president, Richard Schaefer himself, jumped ship. All around the same time that the U.S. government levied those sanctions against Kinahan.
Dick Schaefer migrates to a sports agency that goes by the name Anthem Sports. He's named president of that company in March of last year.
After he left Probellum, which was subsequently rebranded to Disrupt Boxing, Disrupt, they didn't disrupt anything. That rebrand never really got off the ground.
Richard is all but out of boxing.
Seemingly out of boxing, but in spite of all of this, all of these moving parts and the heat being on, Daniel Kinahan is still out there. Daniel Kinahan was never brought to justice. The U.S. government levying those sanctions against him may have limited his area of operations, not allowing him to expand his enterprise here to America. They may have slowed him down, but they didn't stop him.
He's still out there.
Be wary of any entity, any enterprise that recently enters into the sport of boxing seemingly with their own means, their own resources that they're pulling out of thin air.
Who's financing them?
By this time, Daniel Kinahan and his cohorts will have learned from their mistakes. If they were in fact the ones behind Probellum, the now defunct Probellum, they will have refined their strategies.
Learn from their mistakes.
Just to not draw attention to themselves like they did before. Be wary.
Because he's still out there. Watching.
Men's junior middleweight news ahead of his upcoming fight with former champion Keith Thurman. Tszyu says activity matters. He says boxing is devoid of old school fighters. A side, B side, I don't care about that bullshit, Tszyu said in an interview with BoxingScene.com and other media. There's no more old school fighters these days. They're all a bunch of pussies. They fight once a year and then go on 2-year vacations. I actually fight. Activity matters. I'm willing to fight anyone and I do damage in the ring. I don't care about the critics. He's the one that's going to be in trouble, not me. I have activity, momentum. I don't know what he's been doing.
He's talking about Keith Thurman.
Who took most of a 2-year hiatus after the Danny Garcia fight, another 2-year hiatus after the Manny Pacquiao fight, the Manny Pacquiao loss, then he comes back, he fights Mario Barrios, takes another 2 years off.
That's who Tim is talking about.
When you think about these sparsely active fighters, not saying it's exclusive to America, but it does seem to involve quite a few American fighters. You know, Spence wasn't that active going into the Crawford fight. Keith Thurman, we already know about him. Gary Russell.
His younger brother, Gary Antoine Russell, at 140. When's the last time he fought?
Stephen Fulton, former unified super bantamweight champion Stephen Fulton. He's been out since the Inoue fight, the Inoue loss in the summer of last year. Since then, Inoue's already fought 2 times.
Stephen Butler at the end of the year, then Marlon Tapales towards the beginning of this one. And he already has another fight on schedule, while Stephen...
Where is Stephen?
When's he fighting again?
When you hear what Tszyu is saying about activity and how activity matters and how there are no old school fighters, that fighters today, they'll have a fight, then go on holiday for a year or 2.
More American names come to mind, at least for me. More American fighters come to mind when I think about that.
When Tim was saying that stuff, he had Keith Thurman in mind. He said, I know what Keith is and what he's done, but I think the time is done for him. Now it's a different era, and it's the Tszyu era. I'm not just planning to beat Keith Thurman, I'm planning to make this a spectacle, said Tszyu. My goal is for the Tszyu name to be the greatest boxing family that ever lived. We've made it this far, and we'll see how far we can go.
Activity matters.
Stephen Fulton hadn't fought for a year going into the Inoue fight. Errol Spence Jr. hadn't fought in a year going into the Crawford fight. Deontay Wilder hadn't fought in a year going into the Joseph Parker fight.
What do they all have in common?
Keith Thurman hasn't fought in 2 years going into this Tszyu fight.
What does he have in common with the guys I just mentioned?
What, besides the inactivity?
Yeah, besides that, what does he have in common with them?
He's a PBC fighter. He's a PBC guy. And for years I'd been telling you that their budget on Showtime, it was shrinking due to declining viewership and a wavering commitment to the sport of boxing from the Showtime platform. It was growing more and more difficult to get fight dates and get those guys out there, the ones who wanted to get out there, assuming they even did.
I don't really think they did.
But if they did, it was growing harder and harder for the Showtime platform to accommodate them because the annual budget dispersed for boxing and boxing content, it was likely shrinking year by year.
Well, if that's true, then what could they have done?
Go somewhere else. Fight on another platform. See what other opportunities are out there instead of sitting on the shelf collecting dust and amounting ring rust all the while.
Well, therein lies the dilemma.
Even if you're starting to see some PBC fighters jumping ship now and going elsewhere now, before, that was the issue. PBC guys didn't want to leave the island.
Tim's a PBC guy.
Yeah, he is, but he was a No Limit Promotions guy first. And most of the time when he's promoted, the ones bankrolling his shows, it's No Limit Promotions, an Australian-based outfit that is a well-to-do outfit that, if things dry up with the PBC, he can always fall back on them.
His next fight is a PBC show. His next fight is definitely a PBC show here in America, opposite the ring, what was once one of their flagship fighters, all but a has-been now.
Keith Thurman, a quasi-retired fighter. I expect him to knock out at the end of this month. It's beyond that, I wonder, what's he gonna do after that? And who's he gonna fight? Belts are changing hands at 154 pounds, new champions are being crowned, and if Tszyu wants to fight over the summer months, can the PBC accommodate him? And if they can't...
Well, if they can't, he can always do a show in his native Australia like he's been doing, long before he paired up with them.
It's been a lot of talk about how most of the shows happening on Amazon Prime are pay-per-views, are shows that are behind a paywall. They haven't actually announced a free show.
Free to Amazon subscribers, a non-pay-per-view.
I figure that if Tim beats Keith Thurman, and I think he's going to, and then his next fight is in Australia, on No Limit Promotions' dime, they do the show. Maybe that show gets aired here in America via Amazon as a free show, a non-pay-per-view.
That's the only way I could see that happening, because rumor has it Amazon's not giving them any money to do shows.
The PBC. But if No Limit Promotions pays for Tszyu's next show,
After the Thurman fight.
over the summer months, maybe they can air that as a free show, free to Amazon subscribers. I mean, I'm just bouncing ideas around. I'm just guessing. I'm throwing shit at a wall, hoping something sticks.
We'll see what happens after the Thurman fight.
And finally, a second look at Anthony Joshua's comments where he declared that he wants to stay active and fight again in June or July. He's welcoming a potential fight against Filip Hrgovic for what could be the vacant IBF heavyweight title on the predication that Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk will be preoccupied with each other in a rematch.
I don't think there's going to be a rematch.
I think Fury's going to lose. And I think when he loses, he's not going to activate that rematch clause. He's going to take some time off, lick his wounds, and then maybe come back, then maybe fight Anthony. But that all means the same thing, that Anthony may be boxing someone else in his very next fight over the summer months, and that somebody could be Filip Hrgovic.
What do you think about that fight?
My only memories of Filip Hrgovic in action are how impressive he isn't. You know, he didn't look impressive in the Zhilei Zhang fight, which most people think he lost. He didn't impress me in the Dempsey-McKean fight. In truth, Dempsey left more of an impression. He was moving well, getting off punches.
Hrgovic knocked him out late.
But you know, Filip Hrgovic, he didn't look good in that fight either. The common denominator in both the Zhilei Zhang fight and the Dempsey-McKean fight is both those guys were southpaws, whereas Anthony, He's an orthodox fighter.
So it's different.
It would be, though, as stated, I've no recollection of Filip Hrgovic looking all that impressive against orthodox fighters either. He just strikes me as a big guy, very big guy, slow, cumbersome heavyweight, who's not that athletic, doesn't have that much snap in his punches. Most I can say is that because he'd be boxing an orthodox fighter in Anthony Joshua, if he does fight him, maybe he won't be as uncomfortable, because when he boxes southpaws in particular, he looks particularly underwhelming.
Uncomfortable.
Wouldn't be the case with Anthony.
Can Anthony beat him?
Yeah, I think he can beat him. I think he can. I will say, it is a tougher assignment than this past Friday's assignment. I mean, Filip Hrgovic, he's a boxer. He's a boxer. He's not a novice like Francis Ngannou. For what it's worth, he is an Olympian. He is a bronze medalist. He's a medalist like Anthony's a medalist. Filip got the bronze. Anthony got the gold.
Yeah, I think Filip can put up more of a fight than Francis just did. I think he can take a better punch than Francis just took.
It's more of a fight. It's more of an even fight between Anthony and Filip. But I will say that Anthony's got speed and athleticism on Filip,
Faster hands, faster on his feet, better range of motion.
which makes him more explosive. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, once again, the jab is key. The jab is the ticket, the jab is the trick. Changing the cadence on the jab, where you throw it, where it lands, and what it's for.
Can open him up with that jab.
Condition him with that jab. Psych him out. They would respect each other at the start. You'd see fencing of the lead hands, fencing of the jabs.
Anthony's is a little quicker.
So maybe he's pawing with the jab, just pawing with the jab, then touches Hrgovic to the body with a right to come over the top with a left. I've seen him do that. Seen him have success with it.
Hrgovic's very upright, too.
That European style of fighting, the way they don't really bend at the waist very much or angle off.
Torso static.
Head's kind of static. You know, he hides behind his guard. He tries to catch the shots on the gloves.
Get around him.
Hrgovic, he's got those long arms. He kind of looks like a mummy when he's out there, but his body's open. His body's open for something. So if you touch him to the body and get him to drop his hands, you could come over the top with a hook.
Stab to the body with the right hand to bring over the left, or maybe you just jab at his body. Jab with the left.
Jab with the lead hand. Keep putting jabs down there. Condition this guy.
So he doesn't see the straight right hand coming.
Doesn't know when it's coming, when you're going to throw it. Where maybe you touch him up top, couple of times, couple of jabs, then downstairs.
Another jab.
Boom! Here's a right hand.
You see what I mean?
Like I said, Anthony's lighter on his feet than Filip Hrgovic. You know, he can fight out of a wide stance when he wants to, stay on the move when he wants to, stay on his toes, move around, go for a walk.
Can do that.
He's just got a better range of motion than Filip Hrgovic, which allows him to do different things. So I do like Anthony Joshua's chances against Filip Hrgovic if he does end up fighting him over the summer months. I only wonder, is the fight contingent upon the IBF title being on the line?
Is that the only way that fight happens?
If it's for the IBF title. Because let's say Usyk beats Fury, he becomes undisputed champion, he keeps his IBF title, but he doesn't vacate it right away.
Right.
And Fury doesn't activate the rematch clause. Well, who says that Usyk don't end up fighting Hrgovic?
It's just something to think about. We'll see what happens.